Hi guys, welcome to this Christmas special. I'll be making 4 baubles, each one in a different style. I hope you enjoy, and so without further ado, let's get right into it. For this special here, I have these 4 glass baubles. I'm going to make 3 for this stand here, and 1 to hang on the Christmas tree. I'm also going to be making each one different, a desert, a forest, a jungle, and more winter themed one. To get started, in 3 of the baubles, I made a drainage layer out of slate. I'm leaving one of them empty as it won't have much humidity in it. I proceeded to cut a circle out of geotextile fabric to act as a separator between the substrate and drainage layer, making smaller cuts until it fits correctly. I repeated this for 2 more baubles. I'll be making the desert theme first, so the first thing I added was a cactus substrate mix. It contains mainly sand and grit, but also has some pumice and cocoa fibre. I added it and adjusted it with a spoon until I achieved the landscape that I liked. The next thing I had to do was wash the roots of the 3 mini cacti that I have. I broke the soil up with my fingers, water sprayer and screwdriver. Once all the soil had been washed off, I moved on to planting. I started by making a divot with my tweezers to place the first cactus in, near the back. I adjusted it until I was happy with its positioning. The next cactus was planted to the left, slightly forward to add some dimension. This one has spikes and it pricked me quite a few times while I was planting it. The smallest cactus is planted near the front. By having larger plants near the back, it can make a scape seem larger and make it more appealing to the eye. I'm happy with the planting, however it doesn't look like a desert yet, so to accomplish this I added sand to cover all the substrate, and I think this really helps the scape and makes it look good. Now it looks a little empty in places, so to fill the space I added some pieces of wood and I also added some slate stone to add some variation. Moving on to the next bauble, I'm planning on making a mini forest. Like before, I added my substrate, which in this case was a mix I made myself. I listed the ingredients in this video here. I added it, sloping it towards the side and back, creating a sort of valley. To plant this bauble, I'm using 2 small ferns, planting them on either side to create a path leading through the middle. To add more detail, I added a central piece of bark to mimic a fallen tree, and plenty of mosses to simulate a forest floor. I used pillow moss and fern moss to create variation. I placed some Ficus pumila quercefolia, also known as oak leaf creeping fig, to contrast the leaves of the fern and create textural variation in the left of the foreground. I also added some botanicals, outer cones and leaflets to really tie the book together. finish this bauble, I added some slate in places, as mentioned before, to link all the baubles together. Moving on to the next bauble, I add some substrate again, sloping it down to the sides. This one is going to be a jungle theme, so to accomplish that, I used the central focus Hypoestes phyllostachya. I like the pop of colour it brings to a build like this. I also planted a Fittonia Mosaic white, as it's a type of plant I imagine when I think of a jungle. It was planted to the left and contrasts the previous plant nicely. The final major plant in this bauble is a Peperomia rotundfolia to fill the space, and its bright green leaves help simulate a jungle. The final touches for this bauble were quite simple, adding a path of orchid bark to imitate the decomposing matter of a jungle floor, as well as fern moss to enhance the sense of scale, and of course, some slate. However, at this point I decided that the bauble needed a little extra, so I had an oak leaf creeping fig in the foreground. Its leaves help contrast the larger leaves of the other plants. For the final bauble, I wanted a more Christmassy vibe, so I started off by adding substrate, the main focal point is the Peperomia Napoli lights. Its silver leaves look quite festive, and I like how it fills the space. To further go with this silvery theme, I again added a Fittonia to complement the larger leaves. Instead of traditional moss, I used reindeer moss. Maybe it's the name, but I also think it's quite festive. In the foreground, I created a basin out of slate and filled the remaining space with pillow moss. I was happy with how this bauble looked as is, and so I didn't add any botanicals. My plan is to hang these baubles, so to do that I decided to use twine. However, I thought a single loop looked a bit fragile, and so I plaited 3 strings together, and I'm happy with how the outcome looks. It's not the best plaiting, but it will do the trick here. I threaded the twine through the bauble's loop and tied them shut. I slightly singed the tips of the knots just to remove some fraying and add a slightly more weathered look. Like shown earlier, this is the stand I'll be using for 3 of the baubles. I'm a fan of how the baubles look when suspended from it. I have the stand downstairs and hopefully my mum likes it. And I'm hanging the final bauble on the tree. When we take it down, I'll probably keep it as a decoration on a shelf or something similar. Well, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please consider subscribing if you did. And, of course, Merry Christmas to you all.